night was thick with mist, the kind that clung to the edges of buildings and curled around streetlights like ghostly fingers. The city had long been abandoned, its once thriving streets now cracked and overgrown. It was the perfect place for a ghost. And tonight Donna was hunting one. She moved with precision, her black tactical suit blending into the shadows. The small device on her wrist pulsed with a dim blue light, tracking energy signatures that shouldn't exist on Earth. Paul was close. She could feel it. For the last 5 years she had been chasing him, across continents, through underground tunnels and into places even the government feared to enter. Every time she got close, he slipped away like smoke through her fingers. But this time, she had him. This time, she had studied his patterns, anticipated his moves. There was no escape. Faint sound echoed from the alley ahead. Donna pressed herself against the cold concrete, fingers tightening around the grip of her weapon. It was no ordinary gun. Standard bullets wouldn't do against someone like Paul. This one was modified, built specifically to disable creatures, like him. She took a breath, then moved. The alley was narrow, lined with rusted dumpsters and broken pipes. The silence was unsettling. Her eyes scanned the darkness, but there was nothing. No movement, no sign of life. Only the quiet hum of the city's forgotten past. Then she heard it, a whisper barely audible but enough to send a chill down her spine. "You shouldn't be here, Donna." She spun around, gun raised, but there was no one there. His voice had always been like that, soft, calm, almost human. But she knew better. She knew what he really was. "Come out," she commanded, stepping forward. "This ends tonight, Paul." A shadow shifted in the corner of her vision. She fired. The pulse shot ripped through the darkness, striking metal. A trash can toppled over, clattering loudly. But Paul was already gone. Donna cursed under her breath, adjusting the settings on her wrist device. His energy signature was still nearby. He was toying with her the same way he always did. "Still relying on your little gadgets?" His voice came again, this time from behind her. She turned fast, but there was no one there. Just the empty alley, and the feeling of being watched. "You've spent so much time hunting me," he continued, his voice floating through the air like a ghost. "But do you even know why?" Donna clenched her jaw. "Because you don't belong here." Silence. Then a quiet chuckle. "Neither do you." Something moved. She caught the blur of motion out of the corner of her eye, but it was too late. A force hit her, knocking the gun from her grip. She stumbled back, landing hard against the wall. Paul stood in front of her now, his features sharp and unreadable. In the dim light, he looked almost normal. A man in a simple black jacket, dark eyes, and an expression that was neither angry nor afraid. But Donna knew better. She had seen the things he could do. She reached for her backup weapon, but Paul was faster. A flick of his wrist and the device on her arm short-circuited, sparks flying. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his voice softer now. "You think you're on the right side, but you're not." Donna gritted her teeth. "And I should trust you?" "You should trust yourself," Paul said. For the first time, there was something in his eyes. Not fear, not arrogance. Something else. Something she couldn't quite place. Then, before she could react, he was gone. Donna's breath came fast as she scanned the alley. No sign of him. No footsteps. No shadow. It was as if he had never been there at all. Her wrist device flickered weakly, struggling to reboot. She stared at it, trying to steady her breathing. Paul was right about one thing. She had spent years hunting him. She had given everything to this mission, convinced that she was stopping something dangerous. Something unnatural. But now, for the first time, doubt crept in, and deep down she knew something was very, very wrong. The chase had always been the same. Donna tracking Paul, thinking she was one step ahead, only for him to vanish at the last moment. It was maddening. But tonight felt different. Her instincts told her that this time he wasn't going to escape so easily. The abandoned city stretched out before her, a labyrinth of crumbling concrete and twisted metal. The old district had been long forgotten by the world, a ghost town filled with echoes of its past. It was the perfect place for a hunter and her prey. The perfect place for her final confrontation with Paul. Donna moved swiftly through the empty streets, her boots crunching against shattered glass and debris. Her pulse was steady, her focus razor sharp. Every corner she turned, every shadow she passed only brought her closer. She could feel it in her bones. This was it. She had him cornered. Her wrist device beeped faintly, indicating that Paul's energy signature was close. Very close. She paused, her hand gripping the hilt of her weapon, her eyes scanning the darkness. The faint glow of her tracking device illuminated the empty street in front of her, the dim light cutting through the gloom like a knife. A sudden movement caught her eye. A figure darted across her line of sight, vanishing behind a pile of rusted scrap metal. She exhaled slowly, a thin smile creeping onto her lips. "Got you," she whispered to herself. Without hesitation, she sprinted forward, her footsteps silent despite the weight of the hunt on her shoulders. She reached the pile of scrap and peered around it, weapon at the ready. Nothing. She took a step back, scanning the entire area. There was no sign of him. Her heart rate quickened, the unsettling feeling of being watched creeping into her thoughts. This wasn't normal. Not even Paul could move this quickly without leaving a trace. Suddenly she heard it, a low laugh, barely audible, but unmistakable. Paul. He was close, mocking her. "You know," his voice came from behind her, smooth and calculated. "You're too predictable, Donna." She spun around, but once again he was gone. Her breathing quickened. "Enough games," she muttered under her breath, fingers tight around the grip of her weapon. She had no time for his taunts. He was playing her, but not anymore. Another laugh. This time it echoed from the far end of the street. Donna's eyes narrowed. She knew the sound all too well. It was his signature. Paul was close, but he was deliberately staying just out of reach. She moved forward cautiously, each step calculated, keeping her senses sharp. Her mind raced, trying to figure out what he was planning. Why was he taunting her this way? What was he trying to prove? A sudden bright flash of light exploded in front of her, blinding her for a split second. She stumbled back, blinking to clear her vision. The world around her shifted. Her tracking device buzzed, but the readings were erratic. Her pulse monitor spiked. The air felt thicker. Something wasn't right. Before she could react, the ground beneath her feet began to rumble. The entire city seemed to come alive with an eerie hum, like some dormant machine had been awakened. She looked around, panic rising in her chest. What was happening? A shadow moved across the street, fast, impossibly fast. Donna's heart skipped a beat as the unmistakable shape of Paul emerged from the darkness. But this wasn't the Paul she had been chasing for years. This was something else, something stronger. He grinned at her, the expression both mocking and resigned. "You're so close, Donna. You don't even know what you're chasing anymore." He was moving too fast for her to track, almost like he was in two places at once. Her eyes darted around in a panic, trying to keep up. Where was he? Suddenly he was behind her. The air shifted and she spun around, aiming her weapon at him. But before she could fire, he was gone again, blending into the shadows like smoke. "Where are you?" she shouted, her voice echoing through the empty streets. "Right here," came his reply, now from above. She looked up just in time to see him drop down from a high ledge, landing with the grace of a predator. His eyes locked onto hers, the same unblinking stare that had haunted her dreams for years. "Every time you get closer, I slip away," Paul said, his voice almost gentle. "You think you're chasing me, but it's not me you should be worried about." Donna's stomach turned. She didn't have time to process his words. She fired again, but once more he vanished before the shot could land. "You're wasting your time," Paul continued, his voice now coming from every direction at once. "You're chasing the wrong ghost, Donna. The one you want is much more dangerous than I am." The words hung in the air, unsettling and cryptic. Donna didn't have time to think. She just needed to stop him. She raised her weapon again, scanning the darkness. But there was nothing. Only silence. Her device beeped once more, but the readings were all wrong. The signals were jumping around, almost like a glitch. Donna's hand tightened around her gun. She knew he was still here, just out of reach, watching her. But now, something had shifted. Her heart raced. The chase wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Donna stumbled back, her breath sharp, her heart pounding in her chest. The echo of Paul's mocking laughter still hung in the air, reverberating through the empty streets. She scanned the dark alley, the shadows playing tricks. On her eyes, this was different. He was playing a game, but she didn't know the rules anymore. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The mission hadn't changed. She was still the huntress, and he was still the prey. She couldn't afford to let the doubt creep in. Not now. But as she reached down to check her wrist device, she froze. The screen flickered erratically, the readings jumping around like static on an old television. Something was wrong. The signal was supposed to be stable. She had designed the tracker herself, optimized it for alien energy signatures, something she knew better than anyone. Paul had done this. He'd hacked into her system again, just like he always did. But this time, the interference wasn't just tactical. It was something far worse. Her fingers flew across the controls, trying to get the device back online. But every attempt was met with failure. She could still sense him, his energy signature just out of reach, but the deeper she went into her tech, the more chaotic the readings became. Then, the realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Paul wasn't just hiding. He was controlling the hunt. He was manipulating the data, twisting everything she thought she knew. Donna's mind raced. She couldn't let him control this. She'd spent years tracking him, learning everything she could about his abilities. But there was something she hadn't accounted for. Paul wasn't alone. She sat down on the edge of an overturned crate, pulling out her backup device. A much older model. Less advanced, but less susceptible to Paul's interference. As she connected the device, a strange thought crossed her mind. What if Paul had never been the real target? The question gnawed at her, picking at the edges of her certainty. All this time she'd been chasing him. All this time she thought he was the danger. But what if he wasn't? What if he had been running just like she had been? Running from something much worse. She tapped the screen of the backup device, hoping it would give her the answers she needed. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, a chill running down her spine as a new set of data appeared. A series of encrypted government files flashed on the screen, ones she had never seen before. They were buried deep, locked behind layers of security. Donna knew what this meant. These files weren't just about Paul. They were about her. About them. The files detailed a long-forgotten project, a government initiative designed to study and control extraterrestrial life. Projects that had gone dark years ago. Projects that the public had never been meant to know about. And there it was. A name that shook Donna to her core. The Directorate. Her mind whirled as she skimmed through the information. The Directorate was no ordinary government agency. It wasn't a research project. It was an organization. A shadowy collective that had been pulling the strings behind the scenes for decades. Their goal? To control the flow of alien knowledge, to suppress any species that posed a threat to human dominance. And then, one line caught her eye, a detail that she couldn't ignore. Paul was not the first. He was the latest subject. Donna's breath caught in her throat. Paul wasn't an anomaly. He was the product of a program. He was one of many experiments, a culmination of years of research on extraterrestrial beings. And whatever he had become, he was only a small piece of something much larger. But what if the truth was worse than that? What if Paul had never been the real target? What if she wasn't hunting an alien fugitive at all? What if she had been chasing the wrong enemy? Her fingers shook as she continued to read, every word of the file unraveling her sense of purpose. The Directorate wasn't just interested in capturing alien hybrids. No, they had been breeding them, manipulating them for a greater goal, to use them as weapons. Weapons she had been chasing for years, never realizing that the real battle had been about control from the start. Control of the aliens, yes, but also control over people like her. People who were trained to hunt them. Trained to eliminate threats without asking the right questions, without knowing the full truth. God, Donna whispered, her voice breaking the silence. She looked at the glowing screen, her reflection flickering back at her in the darkened window. The woman staring back at her was no longer the determined, confident huntress. She was someone who had been kept in the dark, her every move calculated by forces beyond her understanding. Damn it. Donna's hands shook, the device slipping from her fingers, landing with a soft thud on the concrete. It couldn't be true. She had spent her life hunting Paul, believing he was a threat, but now she wasn't so sure. She didn't know where the line between ally and enemy blurred anymore. The more she learned, the more the truth felt like an illusion, something shifting just out of her grasp. But one thing was clear. The hunt was no longer about just catching Paul. He was a pawn, just like her. And the real danger was far more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. Paul had been trying to tell her in his own twisted way. He had been warning her. And now, it was too late. The truth was out, and Donna was caught in the middle of something much bigger. The question was, would she even make it out alive to tell anyone? Donna's mind was spinning, the weight of the truth settling over her like a heavy fog. The Directorate. It had all been part of their plan, every step of her pursuit. Every mission she had taken had been designed to keep her in the dark. She had been a tool in their game, and now she had no choice but to face the consequences. Her heart raced as she left the abandoned district, walking through the shadows of the city. The once confident huntress was now running on instinct, not knowing who or what to trust. Paul's words kept echoing in her mind. You're chasing the wrong enemy. She had to act fast. The Directorate had already erased all traces of the files she had uncovered. They were closing in on her, she could feel it. The walls were closing in. But as much as she tried to rationalize her next steps, there was one undeniable truth. The danger was real, and it was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. Her wrist device buzzed again, the signal coming back online. But this time, it wasn't Paul's energy signature she was tracking. This time it was something far worse. Her device pulsed with an erratic frequency, and a new set of coordinates appeared on the screen. Coordinates that led to an abandoned underground facility, deep beneath the city. Without thinking, Donna ran. She wasn't sure what awaited her, but she knew one thing for certain. She had to get to the facility before the Directorate did. They would stop at nothing to make sure their secret stayed buried. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she sprinted through the empty streets. The darkness seemed to close in around her, the silence suffocating. It felt as though the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Donna's instincts were on high alert, her senses sharpened to every movement, every sound. She reached the entrance to the underground facility, a rusted metal door hidden beneath layers of graffiti and decay. Her pulse quickened as she shoved the door open, the creak of the hinges loud in the silence. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the remnants of a place long forgotten. The facility stretched out before her, a maze of cold concrete and flickering lights. She didn't know what she was looking for, she didn't even know what she would find, but she couldn't stop now. There was no turning back. Her device led her deeper into the bowels of the facility, guiding her through narrow hallways and darkened rooms. The walls were covered with symbols, some of them familiar, others utterly alien. She could feel the weight of the past pressing in on her, as if the building itself was haunted by the secrets it contained. Suddenly, the floor beneath her feet rumbled, and Donna froze. Her eyes darted to the walls, expecting the worst. Had the Directorate found her already? Had they been tracking her the entire time? A distant noise reached her ears, a low hum that seemed to reverberate through the building. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with each passing second. Then she heard a voice. Donna. The voice was unmistakable. It was Paul. But it wasn't just his voice, it was distorted, twisted by some kind of interference. Paul, she whispered, her voice trembling. The sound echoed through the facility, growing louder and more distorted with every passing second. Donna's heart hammered in her chest as she pushed forward, the humming growing unbearable. She had to find him. She had to understand what was happening. The corridor ahead of her opened into a large, dimly lit room. At the center of the room was a large metallic structure, an enormous containment unit. Donna's device began to beep furiously, the signal growing stronger as she approached. She could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. This was it. In the center of the containment unit, suspended in some kind of energy field, was a figure, Paul. But this wasn't the Paul she had chased for so long. This was something else. His body was emaciated, his skin pale and almost translucent. There were wires and tubes attached to his limbs, and his eyes were closed, as though he were unconscious. The hum in the room was coming from the machine, which pulsed with a rhythmic energy feeding into his body. Donna's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just an experiment. It was torture. The directorate had been using Paul as a test subject, draining him of his energy, experimenting on him to unlock the potential of his alien abilities. But what was even more disturbing was the feeling of presence in the room. It wasn't just Paul. There was something else here. She turned to the corner of the room, her eyes narrowing. There, standing in the shadows, was a figure, a man. His face was obscured, but the sharp silhouette and the cold, calculated posture were unmistakable. It was the director. "Did you really think you were the hunter, Donna?" The director's voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was a coldness to it that sent a shiver down her spine. "Did you think you could capture the truth without understanding the bigger picture?" Donna's mind raced. The director had been watching her all along, manipulating her every move. She wasn't the huntress. She was the prey. Before she could react, the director stepped forward, his cold eyes locking onto hers. "You've been so focused on Paul, but you've never understood what he truly is. He's not an alien. He's a key." The room seemed to grow colder as the truth began to sink in. Paul wasn't just a target. He was part of something far bigger than she had ever imagined. And now, she was in deeper than ever. "You're just another pawn in the game, Donna," the director said, his voice soft but full of menace. "And now, you've played your part." Suddenly the lights flickered and the hum from the machine grew louder. Donna's heart pounded in her chest as the room seemed to spin around her. She was trapped, caught in the tangled web of lies the directorate had woven, and in the center of it all stood Paul, his body still lifeless, his mind locked in some kind of otherworldly prison. But Donna was no longer thinking like a hunter. Now she was thinking like a survivor. And she would do whatever it took to escape this nightmare. Donna's blood ran cold as the director's words hung in the air, each syllable a dagger lodged deep in her chest. She had thought the hunt was about catching Paul, about stopping him from being a threat. But now everything had changed. Paul was no longer just the hunted. He was a key to something far more dangerous, something she had been too blind to see. The director stepped closer, the soft tap of his boots on the concrete echoing in the still room. His presence filled the space, a weight Donna could feel pressing down on her chest. She tightened her grip on the weapon she held, but it felt like a mere toy against the looming figure before her. "Do you still think you can save him?" The director asked, his voice low, mocking. "After everything you've done, after everything you've seen?" Donna's pulse raced as she tried to steady her breathing, her mind struggling to keep up with the rapid unfolding of events. Paul wasn't just the key to unlocking alien powers. He was a test subject, a prisoner in his own body. She had hunted him for so long, believing she was doing the right thing, believing she was protecting humanity from something dangerous. But the truth was far more complicated. "No," Donna spat, her voice stronger now, filled with defiance. "I'm not here to save him. I'm here to stop you." A flicker of amusement passed across the director's cold expression. "You still don't understand, do you?" he said, almost sadly. "The truth is already out of your hands. It always has been." He raised a hand, signaling to the machine that was keeping Paul in his suspended state. Donna's eyes followed his gesture, her stomach turning as the hum grew louder, almost as if the machine was alive. The energy field crackled, and for the first time Donna saw something flicker in Paul's lifeless eyes. A faint, almost imperceptible spark of consciousness. "Paul," Donna whispered, her voice trembling despite herself. "Please fight it." The director watched her, his expression unreadable. "He's beyond saving now, Donna. You can't undo what's been done. The Directorate will use his power to take control of everything. The world you thought you knew, it won't exist anymore." Donna's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white with rage. This was the moment. She couldn't run from it. She couldn't ignore it any longer. The truth was clear. The Directorate had used her as a pawn in their game, and now they were prepared to unleash whatever horrors they had been planning. But Donna wasn't about to let them win. "You think you can control all of this," she said, her voice steady now, filled with purpose. "But you're wrong. You can't control everything, and you can't control him." The director's smile widened, but there was no humor in it. He was beyond confidence. He was certain of his victory. "Let's see," he said, gesturing to a nearby panel. He pressed a few buttons, and the machine that held Paul began to hum even louder, the energy field intensifying, its light flashing erratically. Donna's eyes widened as she saw Paul's body twitch, his limbs jerking violently within the containment field. He was waking up. But something was different now. This wasn't the Paul she had been hunting for all this time. This wasn't the fugitive with the power to disappear into the shadows. The machine was changing him. It was enhancing him in ways Donna couldn't yet comprehend, twisting him into something else entirely. "No," Donna whispered in horror, her hand shooting out toward the panel to stop it, but it was too late. The hum turned into a deafening roar as the energy field surged, pushing Paul's body into an uncontrollable state of convulsions. Then, everything stopped. A silence descended on the room, the kind that rattled bones and made the air feel thick. Donna could feel the tension in the room, the sense that something had shifted, that something was about to change, and she was about to be caught in the middle of it. Paul's eyes shot open, but they were no longer the eyes of the man she had been chasing. They were glowing, an eerie, unnatural light emanating from them, casting a pale hue over his already ghostly face. The power that had been dormant in him was awakening, but it wasn't just alien energy, it was something darker, something more dangerous. He turned his head, his eyes meeting Donna's, and for the first time, she didn't see the fear, the confusion, or the defiance she had once known. Instead, there was an emptiness, a void, a black abyss, and within, it's something that wasn't Paul at all. The director stepped back, his gaze now filled with a strange satisfaction. "It's done. He's been unlocked." "Unlocked?" Donna repeated, her voice barely a whisper, her breath catching in her throat. "What have you done to him?" The director's smile deepened, like a predator relishing its prey's confusion. "You couldn't understand. Paul was never just an alien. He was always a vessel for something more. We've unlocked the true potential of his kind. And now, he's ready." Paul's mouth opened, but it wasn't his voice that came out. The sound that filled the room was guttural, inhuman, something far beyond anything Donna had ever encountered. "We are Legion," it whispered, the words chilling Donna to her very core. Donna's heart raced as she stumbled backward, her mind struggling to comprehend the reality she had just uncovered. This was no longer just a battle between humans and aliens. This was a war for control, and Paul was no longer the prey. He was the weapon. She couldn't stay here. Not now. Not with the director so close, not with Paul, no, whatever he was now, standing there, his energy surging in waves. Donna knew she had to escape, but as she turned to flee, she heard the director's voice one last time. "You can't outrun this, Donna. It's already too late." And just like that, the walls of the facility seemed to close in around her. She wasn't the hunter anymore. She was the hunted. Donna didn't wait to hear any more of the director's chilling words. The sound of her heartbeat thudded in her ears, drowning out the hum of the machine and the disturbing whispers coming from Paul. She knew she couldn't stay, not even for a second longer. If she did, she would be caught in the storm that was building up in this forsaken underground facility. She spun on her heels, her mind racing, her every instinct telling her to run. The hallway stretched before her, a narrow concrete path leading toward the exit she had come in through. But as she took her first step, a loud, crackling sound filled the air. The power in the facility flickered, and then the lights went out, entirely. The whole place was plunged into darkness. Donna's breath hitched in her throat, the weight of the darkness closing in on her. She had trained for situations like this. She had always been prepared for the unexpected, but nothing could prepare her for what she was facing now. She wasn't just up against Paul or the director anymore. She was up against something far more insidious, a force that had been manipulating everything from the very start. Her fingers quickly found the side of the wall, and she pressed her palm against the cool surface, guiding herself through the pitch-black corridors. Every creak of the building, every distant sound made her jump. The unsettling feeling of being watched gnawed at her senses. In her mind, she replayed the last moments with the director, his words repeating in her head. He's ready. But what did that mean? What was Paul becoming? And more importantly, how could she stop it? She knew she didn't have much time. Whatever Paul was now, whatever the director had turned him into, it was powerful. He wasn't the same man she had hunted. He wasn't a fugitive anymore. He was the weapon. And she was standing in the middle of the battlefield without any clear idea of where to go or how to fight. Donna picked up the pace, her pulse thumping in her throat. She had to escape. She had to figure out how to stop the director and his twisted plans, but first, she had to survive. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Faint at first, but getting closer. Someone was coming. She tensed, slipping further into the shadows, her back pressed against the cold, rough surface of the wall. Her breath slowed as she waited for the sound to pass. Whoever it was, she didn't want to be caught. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Donna's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm, to keep her head in the game. She needed information. She needed answers. Just as the footsteps reached the corner ahead, Donna's mind made a snap decision. She dashed forward, moving swiftly and silently, her body blending with the darkness. She had to confront whoever it was. She had no other choice. The risk was high, but so was the reward. She needed to find something, anything that could help her in the fight ahead. As she rounded the corner, she came face to face with a figure. The man was tall, his silhouette barely visible in the dark, but his posture was unmistakable. Another agent of the Directorate. She didn't hesitate. Donna moved like lightning, grabbing the agent by the neck and slamming him against the wall. She pressed her arm across his throat, cutting off his air supply just enough to keep him conscious, but incapacitated. "Talk," she growled, her voice low and dangerous. "Where's the director?" The agent's eyes widened in fear, his hands flailing weakly at Donna's arm as he struggled for breath. Donna's grip tightened slightly, and he stopped fighting. His eyes flicked to the side, toward the direction she had just come from. "He's..." the agent rasped, still trying to catch his breath. "He's at the main control room. It's too late. You can't stop him. He's already begun the final phase." "Final phase?" Donna repeated, her grip loosening just enough to let the man speak, but not enough to let him escape. The key. Paul? He's been turned." The agent managed to wheeze, his voice strained. "He's not just a weapon anymore. He's a conduit, a channel for the Directorate's power. They've used his abilities to harness energy from another dimension, alien energy. The final phase is about merging that power with ours. With the Director's power." Donna's heart skipped a beat. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture was even more horrific than she'd imagined. The Director wasn't just using Paul. He was trying to merge alien energy with human power, creating a hybrid of unimaginable strength. A being so dangerous, it could shift the balance of power on Earth. The agent's eyes filled with terror, knowing what would happen if the final phase succeeded. It's too late for all of us, you're just prolonging the inevitable. Donna's mind raced, her thoughts scattered like wildfire. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't let the Directorate take control of something so destructive. If they succeeded, humanity wouldn't just be at the mercy of aliens, it would be enslaved by its own government. She had to stop this. With one final push, Donna knocked the agent unconscious, letting his limp body slide to the floor. She didn't have time to worry about him anymore. The Director was in the control room. That's where she had to go. She could hear the faint hum of machinery in the distance, the sound growing louder the closer she got to the control room. But as she approached, something felt off. She wasn't alone anymore. Donna felt it before she saw it. The air around her seemed to shift. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, the walls themselves vibrating as if the building had come alive. Then she saw him. Paul, no, the creature that Paul had become, was standing in her way. His eyes glowed with that eerie, unnatural light, and his body seemed to ripple with an energy that defied logic. He wasn't just an alien hybrid now. He was something more, something otherworldly. Donna. Paul's voice rasped, but it wasn't his voice anymore. It was a chorus of whispers, distorted and hollow. You cannot stop what has already begun. Donna took a step back, her heart racing. She had always known Paul was dangerous, but this was something entirely different, something beyond anything she could have imagined. But she wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not when the world was hanging in the balance. Don't make me do this, she whispered, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. I'll stop you, Paul, no matter what you've become. The creature that was once Paul tilted its head, a twisted smile forming on its face. You can't stop what you don't understand. Donna steadied her breath and took another step forward, knowing that this was it. The final confrontation. The moment that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone she had ever known. And with that, she plunged into the darkness, ready to face whatever awaited her. Donna's pulse hammered in her ears as she faced the creature Paul had become. His glowing eyes bored into her, filled with an otherworldly malevolence. The energy radiating from his body seemed to distort the very air around him, making the shadows in the room writhe and twist like living things. She had faced danger before, but never like this, never with the stakes this high. I don't want to fight you, Paul, she said, her voice steady, despite the terror clawing at her chest. I want to help you. For a moment there was no response, just the oppressive hum of the machinery and the echoes of Donna's own breath. Then, the creature's lips curled into a twisted grin, and he stepped forward, his movements too fluid, too unnatural. His feet didn't quite seem to touch the ground as he glided closer. You never understood, Donna, it said, but again, it wasn't Paul's voice. The words were laced with a chorus of whispers, like 1,000 voices speaking through him. You never understood what we are, what we can do. Donna's heart sank. She could see the humanity in his eyes, the same eyes she had chased for so long, but it was buried beneath layers of alien energy and twisted power. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He had become the weapon, and his humanity was being consumed by whatever force had taken over him. You don't have to be this, Donna said softly, trying to reach whatever part of Paul was still buried inside. This isn't you, you can fight it. The creature's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold indifference. The Paul you knew is gone, Donna, and he will never come back. His voice was filled with finality, a death sentence. I am beyond that now. Donna's breath caught in her throat as she realized what he meant. Paul wasn't just an unwilling participant in the Directorate's plan. He was fully integrated into it now. He was the conduit, the key to their ultimate weapon, and there was no turning back for him. She had lost him, not just to the Directorate, but to whatever darker force had seized him. As if to emphasize his words, Paul's body rippled with energy, his form shimmering like liquid light. The air crackled with raw power. Donna's instincts screamed at her to move, to escape, but she held her ground. This wasn't the time to run. She had no idea how to stop him, but she would find a way. "You don't have to do this," Donna said, her voice stronger now, tinged with desperation. "Please fight it. Remember who you were. Remember what we were fighting for." The creature's gaze flickered for just a split second, like a brief window of clarity. Donna saw something in his eyes, something familiar, but it was fleeting. The next instant, the energy around him flared, and that humanity was swallowed whole by the dark force that had overtaken him. "I am not what you think I am." Paul, no, the creature that was once Paul, said, his voice now all but void of emotion. "You never understood, Donna. You were always the hunter, never the chosen one. The Directorate's vision is already in motion. It's too late." The weight of those words crushed Donna's chest. It was true. The final phase of the Directorate's plan had already started. Paul's transformation was complete. There was no going back. But she couldn't let it end like this, not without trying to do something, anything, to save him. In a flash of movement, Paul lunged at her, the air around him crackling with energy. Donna barely had time to react, diving to the side just as his energy surged past her, a wave of force that knocked over a nearby control panel. Sparks flew and the facility shook with the intensity of his power. She rolled to her feet, heart racing, her mind racing even faster. She couldn't fight him with force alone. Not like this. Paul was no longer human, not in the way she understood it. But there had to be something she could do. She needed to disrupt the flow of energy, weaken him somehow, and break the connection he had to the Directorate's machine. She sprinted toward the control panel that had just been blasted, her hands flying over the buttons and screens, desperate to find some way to stop this madness. Her eyes flicked to the monitors, and her heart skipped as she saw a series of complex energy readings flashing in front of her. The containment field around Paul, the one that had kept him suspended and controlled, was weakening. But the readings also showed that his power was intensifying, growing stronger by the second. Donna's mind raced as she analyzed the data. If she could just reverse the energy flow in the containment field, she could disrupt the connection between Paul and the Directorate's technology, but she didn't have much time. He was already coming for her again. She could feel the ground shaking as Paul's form blurred with dark energy, his movements almost impossible to track. But Donna was a soldier, a hunter, and she wasn't about to back down. She had one shot. She took a deep breath and slammed her hand on the emergency override button. For a moment, nothing happened. The hum of the energy around them grew deafening, and then the facility went dark. The lights flickered, and the humming stopped. The energy field around Paul sputtered, and then collapsed entirely, sending a shock wave through the room that knocked Donna off her feet. The air became still, and for a moment, there was only silence. Donna scrambled to her feet, her vision blurred from the impact. She stumbled forward, her eyes locked on Paul's unmoving form. The creature that had once been Paul stood there, his glowing eyes now dim, his body flickering as though the energy that had sustained him was draining away. Was it over? Then, a low growl rumbled from deep within the creature's chest, and Paul's form began to shift again. It wasn't over. The fight was just beginning. Donna's breath caught in her throat as she realized the truth. She had only delayed the inevitable. Paul wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not until the Directorate had what they wanted, and she couldn't let that happen. "I won't let you destroy everything," Donna whispered to the creature. "I will stop you. I'll stop all of you." But in the back of her mind, she knew. This was just the beginning of the war, and she was in deeper than ever. "All of you were supposed to be mine," but Donna stood her ground, her voice steady as she spoke. "No, Director. This ends here. You thought you could control him, but you were wrong. You thought you could control all of us, but we're stronger than you think. And now it's time for you to pay for your crimes." Paul stepped forward, his body no longer glowing, but still radiating with the power of everything he had endured. He looked the director in the eye, his voice calm, but full of authority. "It's over, your plan is finished." The director's face twisted in fury, but Donna and Paul didn't flinch. Together, they were stronger than the darkness that had tried to consume them. As the directorate's facility crumbled around them, the power of the director's plan disintegrating with it, Donna and Paul shared one last look, an understanding that they had survived the impossible, that they had fought against the odds, and that together they had won. The fight wasn't over, and they knew they still had a long road ahead. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, they had a chance, a real chance, to rebuild, to fight for a future where humanity wasn't controlled by fear, by alien forces, or by a corrupt government. Together, they would protect what mattered most: freedom.